What's up? This video is going to be about why I think Bitcoin isn't over yet when it's pretty low and stuff like that. So, like, over the past few days, I've been kind of like just gathering information and saying, what's up. I still believe in the megaphone pattern, honestly, but obviously, I'm not basing my opinion off of the megaphone pattern. I just think it's kind of confluence, I guess, at best. At best, as confluence. If you want to ignore it entirely, you can, right? Think that's perfectly fine to do. It's really not that serious, but yeah, I'm just gonna delete this. Actually, I would keep it up, but basically, obviously, Bitcoin's pretty low. I think it's below the 50-week moving average, and it could close below it, honestly. And I think that's fun. I'm honestly So, like a few weeks ago, I was talking about how the 50-week moving average, I had it in the back of my mind, how it might be a major trap for people native to crypto. Because every cycle, the 50-week moving average has pretty much like if you have two weekly closes below the 50-week moving average, it's marked the end of the bull run. But, and then they talk about the 4-year cycle and all of this stuff, but I am not so it's like I was kind of been bouncing the idea, and I'm not a believer in the 4-year cycle anymore. And I don't think the 50-week moving average has that much significance. I think it has significance. I think it should be used in terms of other things as well, right? Using multiple things, not using one thing to be like, okay, this is the end, right? So I think we might actually get to 2 weeks below it, and then maybe people start freaking out. I'm not sure, but basically, yeah. But I do think before we go up, my base case is we might go down, but I could be wrong about that. I'm not literally betting on it. But basically, if you look at like this line here, there is a lot of stop losses here because I think a lot of people are longing. At least this is what I've seen on like Binance. I'm not sure if it's true on other exchanges, but basically, I think a lot of people have been longing and then they put their stop loss below this wick, which which basically I think we're gonna wick below it, and then we wick below it, the stop loss is trigger, and it gets even worse, and then my whole idea is this demand here gets used, and then we kind of like maybe we chop, go down, then bounce back up. It's kind of how I've been thinking about it, and the reason why this is kind of short term, so I'm not attached to it, right? I'm just saying I think this is the most likely outcome. It could happen, it could not happen, but regardless, I do still think we're going up, and I'll talk about that why now. So basically, I have the statistic for the SPY, and I tried doing it with Bitcoin, but Bitcoin just doesn't have enough data. So basically, remember that the SPY drop. Oh, I'll talk about the 4-year cycle for a second. So why I don't believe in the 4-year cycle actually is because of the SPY. I think Bitcoin has just been some high beta like stock, and basically it will go up more than the SPY and then it'll drop more than the SPY also. So if you really look at basically if you really like look at this, like basically when the SPY had its bull market, like in up until 2017, Bitcoin went hugely up, right? Then you had a bear market for SPY, basically, right? You had all of this volatility, then you had this crash here, and then obviously Bitcoin fell during this. And I think this was because SPY was not doing that good, and maybe defensives and stuff here were outperforming tech. And since this was high beta, it would fall, right? Then you fast forward again, and SPY goes on basically a new bull run. Not like a huge bull run, right? But you have crypto kind of rebounding with SPY after all of this volatility. And then it dies off maybe because defensive are doing good, and then you have your crash, right? This isn't super correlated, I guess, but I feel like for major crashes it really is. And then after this rebound from this 2020 crash, SPY went on a huge bull run, right? And then guess what? That's when Bitcoin went parabolic, right? And then SPY in 2022 entered a bear market. Guess what? So did Bitcoin, but Bitcoin entered a worse bear market because it's high beta, right? And then now SPY's on a new bull run, and Bitcoin's been on a new bull run with the SPY, right? Except it's been outperforming the SPY because it's high beta, right? So whenever the SPY ends its bull run, so will Bitcoin, and Bitcoin will more than likely have a worse correction because it's high beta, right? And basically, if you look farther back, it's probably less true, but that's because the halving cycle mattered a lot more, and because Bitcoin was still being adopted. But I really do think if you go from like 2020 to now, it was adopted enough, and the patterns are a lot more present. But they were even present in 2017 and stuff like that. But Bitcoin was smaller then, so it's like when do you want reliable data? When can you call your data reliable? We only have like 10 years of data, which is not much, right? Which is why people have been calling for the 4-year cycle. But I think the 4-year cycle never really existed, and it's just been a pattern people have been noticing. But they also don't notice how that it's just correlation with the SPY and it being high beta, right? So that's why I don't really believe in the 4-year cycle and stuff like that. Now I'll talk about why Bitcoin will go up, given that I think, um, Bitcoin is just a high beta stock, right? That could be in the SPY, but it's not in the SPY. I'm just like, let's just say it is, right? It's just high beta for the SPY. So first off, we have the statistic with the SPY. So whenever the SPY dropped, this, so basically when we had this 2.7% drop on the SPY, I think it really opened up a lot of context. So basically, I think statistics capture context in the markets, right? And sometimes the more narrow a statistic is, like more conditions, the more context you're adding. But the key is you need to have a lot of data, and it needs to really, like, in my opinion, be above 75% in your favor or against your favor for it to be meaningful. Otherwise, it can just be noise unless you have 200 data points or something, right? But I really do think like conditional statistics like this drop capture a lot of context in the market. It doesn't capture every bit of context, but you look at previous markets and you're like, oh, this had this drop. What did it do after? Obviously, the interest rates for the Fed, quantitative easing or tightening, like M2 liquidity, all of that matters. But this drop gives us some similar market conditions where it happened to drop similarly, and the psychology of the markets and stuff like that may be present in past markets, stuff like that, right? So it's not the end all be all, but I do think it gives us an insight into previous contexts, like previous markets where we had similar context, right? Not completely the same, but similar, right? So basically, after a 3.25 to 2.25% drop in the SPY, I didn't want to make it any bigger because let's say it's a 3.5% drop, that might be too much and it might change the context, right? The psychology might be different. And if it's only like 2%, maybe the drop isn't enough, right? So I tried to get like in a range of that drop and just to see what were to happen, right? So basically, 60% it's up, right? Which makes sense, right? I don't think that really gives us any insight because markets ultimately are up and to the right because of monetary policies, right? But this really doesn't give us any insight, but the 2 month really doesn't give us any insights either. But if you look at the 2 month when the 1 week was positive, so basically you filter out 40% of the data, right? You gain 83% win rate, and the average 2 month returns in the median are around 6%, right? And then the 75th percentile is 10%, and the 25th percentile is 2.5%, which means you're pretty much overwhelmingly positive. But there were some negative returns, but they were infrequent, right? So obviously it's all about probabilities. But I think looking at the statistic, it tells us that probabilities are in our favor, right? We had a 2.25 to 3.25% dip, and that was quickly bought up, which is why the 1 week was positive. And now we're like playing the statistic. The statistic is now playing out. And then if you look at it, the 1 week was 1.75%. Then now we're at 4.45% up. So we might get some volatility. We might go down, then we might go up, and we might end at 6% right on the 2 months, which is fine in my opinion. Like maybe it's similar to this statistic right here in 2021, right? Or I'm trying to look for like a 1 point. Could be similar to this, right? The 2 week was negative, right? But then you bounce up to a 5% positive. Or it could be similar to this, which we talked about. Could be similar to this. Right now, like if we look at the 1 week returns, these don't look overwhelmingly good, honestly. But it's basically saying that the SPY still has some room to run, right? Looking at similar like level of dip buys, right? The 2 week and the 3 week were negative, but then we had a 7.3% on the 2 month, right? So basically, it's saying that volatility does come, and we might be experiencing volatility in the SPY, but eventually, in the course of 2 months, we're positive, right? So basically, like maybe we just continue going down here. People are like, oh no, it's over. Then Bitcoin, does its liquidity sweep while the markets go down, like the SPY, right? Because it's high beta. Then we get our mean reversion, and then we bounce back up. And then maybe sometime in December, we end around 6 to 10% higher than this drop here, right? I think that's perfectly possible. And that would be right in line with the statistics if we expect no abnormalities. And then if we look at, there's an area risk thing that I did, and it like tracks like mean reversions and stuff like that. Basically, we're pretty elevated. We're at the 94th percentile for rallies up without a mean reversion. So we're basically due for a mean reversion. I'm not saying a mean reversion is going to happen now, but with confluence of other statistics like this, like the SPY drop I talked about earlier, I do think we are kind of due for it. And this is around where a lot of mean reversions have happened, at least in the 1990s and more recently also. And if you really look at it, even in the 1990s before the crash, we had a bunch of mean reversions before the crash, right? And it was kind of true in 2000s. Like, I don't know. Maybe it was only true for the 90s, right? I'm not going to try and force that opinion. It was just an observation, right? So I do think a mean reversion might happen. I think it's likely to happen, actually. And then like a quick rebound, right? But it's not impossible for me to be wrong, right? And then also there are the statistics. Like I think I talked about this earlier. Like if Jan to September is plus 10% with a positive September for the SPY, then October is historically choppy, which we had a choppy October, and then November and December are usually pretty good, right? So basically there's a lot of confluence with these statistics, and there's a lot of other stuff that's like, okay, this is probably how the markets will play out. It's not guaranteed, it's just the most likely outcome in my opinion, right? Could it be over now? Sure, right? But I don't think betting on the markets being over now are in your best favors, right? Now anything's possible, which is why you need to use risk management and stuff like that. But this is kind of what I've been seeing. Though, like a few days ago, I was kind of confused because I did not expect this volatility, honestly. But maybe it's just the market makers trying to liquidate these stop losses, because apparently there are a lot under this level. That's basically it for why I'm bullish. I think I talked like pretty decently about it, and obviously I bought my Bitcoin around here, so like I think I'm down on my position. But that's fine. You're not always in profit, right? And I think Bitcoin can go 140 to 160 maybe. And then once Bitcoin reclaims 116, 116.5 is going to be my entry. And then I'm going to enter in half on Bitcoin and half on Ethereum. And I am going to use pretty heavy position sizing just because if it's over, I do not think we're re-clearing 116.5. So that's just my opinion. But if it's over, I think we are going to go down further more and then rebound. We're not going to rebound and then drop again. That's just how I that's just how I see things playing out if we are down. It just wouldn't make any sense for us to rebound at these levels. But I could be wrong. But like with the SPY and everything, right? I don't think we're going to go down long term over the next 2 months. I think we might have a blow off top phase and stuff like that. But that's just my opinions and stuff like that. Yeah, and then looking at Reddit, um like sentiment is actually like relatively positive, which I didn't really expect that. Like here, people are saying we're at 2, which I actually do kind of agree with it, which makes me think we kind of need that drop to scare the average person out. Um yeah, basically, yeah. And this is pretty bullish, honestly, and I'm really not wanting to see posts like that. Um, yeah, like people are been bullish, honestly. I mean, this has been a few days ago, but I mean, this is negative, obviously. This is some conspiracy. Probably like coping memes. This is funny, honestly. I like this. But like people are a lot more at least on Reddit, a lot more bullish, and or at least a lot more bullish than I would have imagined. Obviously, where is it? Right here. Like if we look at whales and stuff, like they're definitely buying. Sharks are now selling, but it really does look like the whales are really like buying the fear of the sharks. This is kind of how I see it. But usually, like before bottoms, like if you look at here, whales kind of like picked up a little bit, and then we had our rally, right? Um, I think it was true here. Like whales were buying into this dip, and then so now whales are buying instead of selling. So maybe we should be going up. And then if you look at humpback whales, they've been really buying a considerable amount, since you can see it in the charts like going up. And the last time they did that was here, during this dip. So, and they bought it here, I think, a little bit here during this dip. So I think like maybe a week more max before we should go up, in my opinion. Now sharks have been selling, and they did sell a little bit here. I think they sold a little bit into this dip, but you know, who knows, right? And then everyone else just doesn't matter, right? Yeah, but humpback accumulation has literally skyrocketed, right? So I do think there's some demand for these people at these levels. And now sharks are selling, which I found interesting. And then one other interesting thing is I will switch bearish even with kind of the um positive statistics if this happens. So I'm trying to find the open interest. Yeah. So right now the open interest is super low in my opinion. But basically, I'm trying to. Did this freeze? Wow, I guess it's just lags if I try and mark. I just wanted the two main things, but basically, open interest is going back up, which is exactly what you want to see, in my opinion. So I was really scared because open interest dropped to 39, whatever, right? But during these drops, we went to 33, right? So open interest was really not, during this drop, was literally not that close. And you really want more open interest because basically open interest is participation in the markets. So this drop is actually very scary, but it looks like we're having a huge spike up in open interest, which means a lot more participation. And I do think maybe this is a low we found, and then we just continue to go up from here, which would be nice. But yeah, and then maybe we have a euphoric, and then that brings us to maybe 100 million or whatever this number is, or 100 billion, whatever. And yeah, but like wiping out these lows was actually kind of scary in terms of participation. But it looks like you have higher low, maybe higher low here, and then maybe euphoria, or it's over because this open interest, this participation does not really look that good. But um, like like I mean, I guess it wasn't super good here, but that's how you knew it was kind of over. So like open interest is kind of waning. So I do think we're kind of at the end. Like we might be here in my opinion. I actually think we're kind of like right here. And then maybe open interest will go up. But if open interest does not like clear these levels, like you see how there's like kind of like a great reset here, and then we like went up, but this was clearly like a double top because open interest was just not the same. And I think open interest here is just not the same because I really was liking this higher low, higher low, higher low, right? And then now we have lower low, if you count this low, right? You can look at it multiple ways, but this does look like this higher low even is just very close to this. But if we wipe this 33, then I'm calling it quits, right? Because even for these bad lows right here, like we just did not, we still made like higher lows and stuff like that, but yeah, like I do think it's kind of like we're towards the end in my opinion, but I guess there was a lot of the end here, who knows. And then fear and greed is good, right? We're in extreme fears. Oh, I mean, like if a bottom is gonna come, it's probably gonna come relatively soon, right? Just given the fear and greed levels. But maybe we chop around here for a month. Who knows, right? I don't think we have much time though, but who really knows? I say give it like a couple more weeks because we've been really grinding down for a while. Versus this was kind of more sudden, and this has been like very long of in terms of drawdown. So yeah. But basically, that's just kind of my opinions and why I think Bitcoin is fine and will probably continue up over the next 2 months. But it's not guaranteed, and it's just my opinions, right? But yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it all plays out, honestly.